The frozen wind cut through Delilah Wright's threadbare coat like 1,000 tiny knives, each gust stealing what little warmth remained in her trembling body. She had been walking for hours through the Colorado mountains, foolishly believing she could make it to the mining camp before the storm hit. But the blizzard had descended with such sudden ferocity that she could barely see her own hands stretched out before her face. The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, and every step forward felt like wading through an ocean of white death. Her feet had gone numb an hour ago, and now she stumbled more than walked, her mind growing foggy with the cold that seeped into her bones. This was how it would end, she thought with a strange detachment, alone in these mountains, just another soul claimed by the unforgiving Colorado winter of 1885. She had left Pueblo 3 days earlier with a wagon train heading north, desperate to escape the memories of her father's death and the debts he had left behind. The creditors had been circling like vultures, and when old Mr. Henderson offered her passage in exchange for cooking duties, she had jumped at the chance. But Henderson's wagon had broken an axle 2 days into the journey, and while the men worked to repair it, Delilah had wandered too far from camp, chasing after a rabbit she thought might make a decent stew. By the time she realized how far she had strayed, the storm was already building on the horizon, dark clouds rolling over the peaks like harbingers of doom. She had tried to find her way back, but everything looked the same in the gathering snow, and soon she was hopelessly turned around. Now her legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed into a snowdrift, the cold embracing her like a long-lost lover. Part of her wanted to simply close her eyes and let sleep take her, but something deeper, some stubborn spark of survival, kept her conscious. She thought of her mother, dead these 10 years, and wondered if she would see her soon. She thought of the dreams she had cherished, of finding work in Denver, of building a new life far from the hardship and sorrow that had defined her 22 years. It seemed cruel that those dreams would die here. Buried beneath the snow through the howling wind, she heard something, a sound that did not belong to the storm. Hoofbeats, heavy and steady, coming closer. She tried to lift her head, tried to call out, but her voice was barely a whisper, swallowed by the wind. The hoofbeats stopped somewhere nearby, and then there were footsteps, crunching through the deep snow. "Lord have mercy," a man's voice said, deep and rough but touched with concern. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, turning her over. Through her snow-crusted eyelashes she saw a face above her, weathered and tanned beneath the brim of a wide hat, dark eyes studying her with urgent intensity. "Can you hear me, miss? Stay with me now." She tried to speak, but her lips would not form words. The cold had stolen that ability along with everything else. "I have got you," the man said, and then she felt herself being lifted, cradled against a solid chest. The world spun, and she was dimly aware of being placed on a horse, the man climbing up behind her, his arms encircling her to hold the reins. "My cabin is not far. You hold on, you hear me? Hope starts here." Those 3 words penetrated the fog in her mind, an anchor in the chaos. Hope starts here. She clung to them as the horse began to move, each jolting step sending waves of pain through her frozen limbs. The man held her secure against him, and she could feel the warmth of his body even through their layers of clothing. She wanted to thank him, wanted to ask his name, but consciousness was slipping away from her like water through her fingers. When she next opened her eyes, she was lying on something soft, and blessed warmth surrounded her. A fire crackled nearby, its orange glow dancing across rough-hewn log walls. Heavy blankets covered her, and she realized with a start that someone had removed her wet clothing, replacing them with a soft flannel nightshirt that was far too large for her frame. Panic fluttered in her chest, But then the man appeared in her line of sight, carrying a steaming mug, and his expression was so earnest and concerned that her fear ebbed. "Easy now," he said, kneeling beside the bed. "You have been out for near about 3 hours. I was starting to worry you might not wake." He held the mug to her lips. "This is hot broth. You need to drink slowly." The warm liquid touched her lips, and she drank, the simple act of swallowing taking more effort than it should. The broth was rich and salty, and it seemed to spread warmth through her chest with each sip. After a few swallows, she found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a rasp. "Where am I?" "My cabin, about 5 miles west of Salida," the man said. "I am Cole Zimmerman. I was heading back from checking my trap lines when I spotted you in the snow." He set the mug on a nearby table and studied her face. "What is your name, miss? And what in the blazes were you doing out in that storm?" "Delilah Wright," she managed. "I got lost. I was with a wagon train, but I wandered from camp and could not find my way back." Cole shook his head, his expression grave. "That storm came down fierce and fast. You are lucky I found you when I did. Another hour out there and you would not have made it." He stood and moved to the fire, adding another log. "You can stay here until the storm passes and you get your strength back. I have got food and firewood enough for both of us." Delilah wanted to protest, to say she could not impose, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave and her eyelids grew heavy. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving me." "Rest now," Cole said, his voice gentle. "We will talk more when you are stronger." She slept then, a deep and dreamless sleep, the kind that comes only after surviving something that should have killed you. When she woke again, pale winter light filtered through a small window, and the storm had lessened to a steady snowfall. Her body ached in a dozen places, and her fingers and toes burned with the fire of returning circulation, but she was alive. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings with clearer eyes. The cabin was small but well built, a single room with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A rough-hewn table and 2 chairs occupied the center of the space, and shelves lined with supplies ran along the back wall. Animal pelts hung from the rafters, cured and ready for sale. It was a simple dwelling, the home of a man who lived by his own labor and asked nothing from anyone. Cole sat at the table, working on mending a leather harness, but he looked up when he heard her stirring. "You are awake," he said, setting aside his work. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," Delilah admitted, "but better than I have any right to be." She pulled the blankets around herself, suddenly conscious of her state of undress. "My clothes, drying by the fire," Cole said, gesturing to where her dress, petticoats, and stockings hung on a makeshift line. "They were soaked through. I hope you do not mind, but I could not leave you in wet things. You would have caught your death." A faint flush colored his weathered cheeks. "I was as respectful as possible, I give you my word." "I believe you," Delilah said, and she did. There was something fundamentally decent about this man, something in the way he carried himself that spoke of integrity. "I owe you my life, Mr. Zimmerman." "Cole," he corrected. "And you do not owe me anything. Any decent person would have done the same." He stood and moved to the stove, ladling soup from a pot into a bowl. "You need to eat. Build your strength back up." As he brought her the bowl, Delilah studied him more carefully. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of lean, muscular build that came from years of hard physical labor. His face was handsome in a rugged way, all strong lines and sharp angles, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. His dark hair was a bit too long, curling at his collar, and his eyes were the color of rich coffee. She guessed he was somewhere in his late 20s, perhaps 28 or 29. There was a quiet competence about him, the bearing of a man who could handle whatever the wilderness threw at him. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, accepting the bowl gratefully. Near about 5 years now, Cole said, settling back into his chair. I came out from Missouri after the war looking to make my own way. I trap and hunt, sell the pelts in Salida. It is a solitary life, but it suits me. You fought in the war? Delilah asked, then immediately regretted the question when she saw the shadow that crossed his face. I did, Cole said simply, and the tone of his voice made it clear he did not wish to elaborate. She understood that. Everyone who had lived through those terrible years carried scars, some visible and some not. They fell into a comfortable silence as Delilah ate, the soup warming her from the inside out. Through the window, she watched the snow continue to fall, blanketing the world in white. The storm might have eased, but it was far from over. I should try to find my way back to the wagon train, she said, though even as she spoke the words, she knew how foolish they sounded. Mr. Henderson will be worried. You are not going anywhere in this weather, Cole said firmly. Even if you were strong enough to travel, which you are not, it would be suicide to venture out. That storm has another day or two left in it at least. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Your wagon train has likely moved on or turned back to Pueblo. Either way, they are long gone by now. Delilah's heart sank as she realized he was right. She had nothing, no money, no possessions except the clothes on her back, stranded in the Colorado mountains with winter closing in. The hopelessness of her situation threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it down, refusing to give in to despair. She had survived this long through sheer stubbornness, and she would not give up now. Then I will find work in Salida, she said, lifting her chin. I can cook and clean, mend clothes, whatever needs doing. I will not be a burden on you longer than necessary. Something flickered in Cole's eyes, something that might have been respect. You have got spine, I will give you that, he said, but you do not need to worry about being a burden. Like I said, you can stay until the storm passes and you are well enough to travel. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. Salida is a rough town, Miss Wright. It is mostly miners and railroad men, and respectable work for a woman alone can be hard to come by. I will manage, Delilah said, though doubt gnawed at her. She knew what he was implying, knew the limited and often degrading options available to women without means or protection in frontier towns. Cole stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the falling snow. My sister runs a boarding house in Salida, he said after a moment. She is always looking for help, someone who can cook and keep the place clean. The work is hard, but she pays fair and treats her people right. When the storm breaks, I will take you into town and introduce you. If you want the job, it is yours. Relief flooded through Delilah, so intense it brought tears to her eyes. I would be grateful, she said, her voice thick with emotion. More grateful than I can say. Cole turned back to her, and for the first time she saw him smile, a slow, genuine expression that transformed his face. Then it is settled, he said. Over the next 3 days, as the storm raged outside, Delilah and Cole settled into an unexpected harmony. She was not content to simply lie abed, despite his protests that she needed rest, and soon she was helping with the daily tasks of cabin life. She cooked meals while he saw to the animals in his small barn, a sturdy structure that housed his horse, a mule, and a milk cow. She mended his clothes, her neat stitches a stark contrast to the rough repairs he had been making for himself. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked, sharing stories of their lives. Delilah told him about growing up in Kansas, the daughter of a farmer who had lost everything to drought and misfortune. She spoke of her mother's death from fever, of the long, hard years that followed as she and her father struggled to survive. She told him about her father's passing just 2 months earlier, how he had simply gone to sleep one night and never woken, his heart finally giving out under the weight of too many sorrows. She explained the debts, the creditors, the desperate need to start fresh somewhere new. Cole listened without judgment, his dark eyes attentive. In turn, he shared pieces of his own history. He had grown up on a farm in Missouri, the youngest of 4 children. When the war came, he had enlisted at 17, full of naive ideas about glory and honor. Those ideas had died quickly in the blood and mud of battlefields whose names still haunted him. After the war, he had returned home to find his parents dead from cholera and his siblings scattered to the winds. With nothing to hold him, he had headed west, eventually finding this isolated cabin and the solitary life that helped quiet the ghosts. "Do you ever get lonely?" Delilah asked one evening as they sat by the fire, the wind howling outside like a wounded animal. Cole considered the question, poking at the logs with an iron rod. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I learned during the war that being alone and being lonely are not always the same thing. Out here I have peace. I answer to no one, depend on no one." He glanced at her, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Though I will admit, it has been nice having company these past few days." Delilah felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. "It has been nice for me too," she said softly. "You have been kind to me, kinder than you had any obligation to be." "Kindness should not be about obligation," Cole said. "It should just be." As the days passed, Delilah found herself noticing things about Cole that made her pulse quicken in a way she had never experienced before. The way his hands moved with such confidence and skill as he worked. The sound of his laugh when she said something that amused him, a deep, rich sound that seemed to fill the cabin. The concern in his eyes when he checked on her, making sure she was not overexerting herself. She had known men before, had even been courted by a banker's son back in Kansas, but she had never felt this strange, fluttering awareness, this constant pull toward another person. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke, and brilliant sunshine flooded across the snow-covered landscape. The world outside was transformed into something magical, every surface glittering with ice crystals. The trees bowed under their white burden. Cole declared that they would leave for Salida the next morning, giving the trails one more day to become passable. That evening, as Delilah prepared supper, she found herself moving slower than usual, dreading the moment when she would have to leave this cabin and the man who had saved her. She told herself she was being foolish, that she had known him less than a week, that he had shown her nothing but the hospitality any decent person would extend. But her heart did not listen to logic, and she realized with a start that she was falling in love with Cole Zimmerman. The thought should have frightened her, but instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Here was a man who had found her at her lowest moment and offered her hope. Here was a man who treated her with respect and kindness, who listened when she spoke, who seemed to genuinely care about her well-being. Here was a man whose presence made her feel safe in a way she had never felt before. But did he feel anything for her? She studied him covertly as they ate, trying to read his expression. He caught her looking and raised an eyebrow, a question in his eyes. "Something on your mind?" he asked. Delilah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was just thinking how strange life is," she said, not quite a lie. "A week ago I was certain I was going to die in that storm. Now I am sitting here, warm and fed, with a new job waiting for me in town. It feels almost like a dream." "It is real enough," Cole said. "You have got a chance to start over, Miss Wright. Not everyone gets that." His expression grew serious. "I hope you know how remarkable you are. Most people would have given up out there in the snow, but you fought. You survived." "Only because you found me," Delilah said. Hope starts here, that is what you said. I held onto those words. Cole looked away, seeming uncomfortable with the praise. I am glad I was there, he said simply. That night, Delilah lay awake in the bed while Cole slept in his bedroll by the fire, as he had done every night since she arrived. She stared at the ceiling beams, her mind spinning with thoughts and feelings she could barely name. Tomorrow they would ride to Salida, and she would begin her new life at the boarding house. Cole would return to his cabin and his solitary existence. They might see each other occasionally when he came to town for supplies, but the intimacy of these past days would be gone, replaced by polite distance. The thought was almost unbearable when dawn came. She rose and dressed in her own clothes, now clean and dry. Cole had already been up for an hour preparing for the journey. He had saddled his horse and loaded supplies onto the mule, moving with efficient purpose. When he saw her emerge from the cabin, he nodded approvingly. You look stronger, he said. How are you feeling? Well enough to travel, Delilah assured him, though her heart felt heavy. The ride to Salida took most of the morning, the horse picking its way carefully through the deep snow. Delilah rode in front of Cole, his arms around her to hold the reins, just as they had been positioned when he first found her. But this time, she was conscious of every point of contact, of the solid strength of his chest against her back, of his warm breath stirring her hair. She wanted to memorize these sensations, to hold them close against the loneliness she knew was coming. Salida appeared before them like a small oasis of civilization, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along the Arkansas River. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys, and even from a distance, they could hear the sounds of industry. Hammering, sawing, the whistle of the train that ran through town. It was not a large settlement, perhaps a few hundred souls, but it was bustling with the energy of a place that was still growing, still reaching toward its potential. Cole guided the horse down the main street, drawing a few curious glances from passers-by. He stopped in front of a large, two-story building with a painted sign that read, Zimmerman's Boarding House. Before Delilah could dismount, the front door flew open, and a woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. She was beautiful in a strong, capable way, with the same dark hair and eyes as Cole, though her features were softer, more delicate. She was perhaps 30 years old, and there was an air of competence about her that reminded Delilah of a general surveying her troops. Cole, the woman exclaimed, her face breaking into a delighted smile. I was not expecting you for another week at least. Then her gaze fell on Delilah, and curiosity sparked in her eyes. And who is this? Cole swung down from the horse and helped Delilah dismount, his hand steady on her waist. Catherine, this is Miss Delilah Wright. I found her nearly frozen to death in the storm a few days back. Delilah, this is my sister, Catherine Zimmerman. Catherine's expression shifted immediately to concern. Good Lord, come inside at once. You must be exhausted from the ride. She bustled forward, taking Delilah's arm with gentle firmness. I will put the kettle on and you can tell me everything. Within minutes, Delilah found herself seated at a large kitchen table, a cup of hot tea warming her hands while Catherine moved about with practiced efficiency. The boarding house was clean and well-maintained, with lace curtains at the windows and cheerful paintings on the walls. The scent of fresh bread filled the air, and Delilah could hear the murmur of voices from the common room where the boarders gathered. Cole explained the situation to his sister, including his suggestion that Delilah might find employment with her. Catherine listened intently, her intelligent eyes moving between her brother and their guest. Of course you can work here, Catherine said when Cole finished. Heaven knows I can use the help. I've got 12 boarders right now, and 2 more arriving next week. The cooking and cleaning never stops. She reached across the table and squeezed Delilah's hand. "I will provide room and board plus $2 a week. The work is hard, but I think you will find it fair." Relief washed over Delilah. $2 a week was not a fortune, but it was honest pay, and more importantly, it was a fresh start. "Thank you," she said earnestly. "I promise you will not regret hiring me." "I am sure I will not," Catherine said warmly. Then she turned to her brother, a knowing look in her eyes. "Will you be staying in town for a while, Cole?" "Just tonight," Cole said. "I need to sell my pelts to Henderson at the trading post, then I should head back to the cabin." Something flickered across Catherine's face, too quick for Delilah to read, but the other woman simply nodded. "Well, you are welcome to stay here, as always. I will have one of the girls make up a room for you." The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Catherine showed Delilah to a small but comfortable room on the second floor, then gave her a tour of the boarding house, explaining the routines and expectations. There were meals to prepare for specific times, rooms to clean daily, linens to wash every week. It was indeed hard work, but Delilah threw herself into it gratefully, needing the distraction from the knowledge that Cole would be leaving in the morning. She saw him only briefly that evening when the boarders gathered for supper. He sat at the long table, quiet and somewhat out of place among the animated miners and railroad workers who filled the other chairs. His eyes found hers across the room, and something passed between them, a wordless communication that made her chest tighten. After the meal, as Delilah helped clear the dishes, Catherine pulled her aside. "My brother does not often bring people to town," she said quietly. "In fact, in the 5 years he has lived in these mountains, you are the first." Delilah was not sure how to respond to that. "He saved my life," she said simply. "I know," Catherine said, and there was something speculative in her gaze. "I just thought you should know that Cole is not as solitary as he pretends to be. He acts like he prefers being alone, but I think it is more that he is afraid of letting people close. The war did things to him, things he will not talk about, and when he came back he was different, harder, more closed off." "Why are you telling me this?" Delilah asked, though she thought she knew. Catherine smiled. "Because I saw the way he looked at you during supper. And I saw the way you looked at him. I do not want either of you to be foolish enough to let something good slip away because of fear or pride." Heat flooded Delilah's cheeks. "Mrs. Zimmerman, I hardly think. It is Miss Zimmerman, actually," Catherine interrupted gently. "I never married." "And please call me Catherine." She squeezed Delilah's arm. "Just think about what I said." That night, Delilah lay in her new bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Catherine's words. Did Cole truly feel something for her, or was she projecting her own feelings onto him? The uncertainty was maddening. She wanted to go to him, to tell him what was in her heart, but fear held her back. What if she was wrong? What if he rejected her? The humiliation would be unbearable, and worse, she would have to see him whenever he came to town, a constant reminder of her foolishness. But what if Catherine was right? What if Cole felt the same way but was too afraid to say anything? Could she really let him ride away without at least trying? Dawn came too soon, pale winter light filtering through her window. Delilah rose and dressed quickly, her heart pounding. She had made her decision. Whatever the outcome, she could not let Cole leave without knowing the truth. She found him in the stable behind the boarding house, saddling his horse. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. "You are up early," he said. "I could not sleep," Delilah admitted. She moved closer, her hands twisting nervously in her skirt. "Cole, I need to tell you something before you go." He set aside the saddle blanket, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" Now that the moment was here, the words stuck in her throat. She forced herself to meet his eyes, to draw courage from the kindness she saw there. I know we have only known each other a few days, she began, her voice trembling slightly. And I know you saved me out of simple human decency, not because you expected anything in return. But these past days with you, they have meant more to me than I can properly express. You made me feel safe and valued and cared for, and I realized that I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you. Cole stared at her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, terrible and vast, and Delilah felt her courage begin to crumble. I am sorry, she said quickly, taking a step back. I should not have said anything. Please just forget, Delilah, Cole said, and the way he spoke her name, soft and almost reverent, stopped her retreat. He crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides, and then his hands were cupping her face, tilting it up toward him. I have been trying to figure out how to say the same thing to you since yesterday. Her breath caught. You have. I have not been able to stop thinking about you, Cole said, his thumbs stroking her cheeks with infinite gentleness. When I found you in that storm, I thought I was just saving a stranger's life. But then you woke up, and you were so fierce and determined, refusing to give in or give up, and I started to realize that you were extraordinary. These past days, having you in my cabin, talking with you, laughing with you, it made me remember what it feels like to not be alone. And this morning, the thought of riding back to that empty cabin, of going back to my solitary life, it felt wrong. It felt like leaving behind the best thing that has ever happened to me. Tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. Then do not go, she whispered. Stay. I cannot ask you to give up this opportunity, Cole said. You need this job, this fresh start. I need you more, Delilah said fiercely. The job, the boarding house, it is all meaningless if you are not here. Cole's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Then I will stay, he said. Not forever in town, I could not bear that, but I will come in more often. Once a week, twice if the weather holds. And maybe, if you are willing, you could visit me at the cabin on your days off. Catherine gives you 1 day a week, does she not? She does, Delilah confirmed, joy bubbling up inside her. Then we will make it work, Cole said. We will find a way because I am not letting you go. Not now, not ever. And then he kissed her, his lips warm and gentle against hers. It was Delilah's first real kiss, and it was everything she had ever imagined and more. She melted into him, her hands clutching his coat, and for that perfect moment, the rest of the world ceased to exist. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Delilah Wright, he said. I know it is too soon. I know we have not known each other long enough, but I cannot deny what is in my heart. I love you too, Delilah said, the words flowing from her as naturally as breathing. From the moment you found me and told me hope starts here, I think part of me knew. They stood there in the stable, wrapped in each other's arms as the rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was a new beginning, born from a storm and a chance encounter, and it felt like the start of something wonderful. True to his word, Cole did not return to his isolated existence. He sold his pelts in town, and then took a room at Catherine's boarding house, declaring his intention to stay for at least a week. Catherine seemed entirely unsurprised by this development, merely smiling knowingly as she assigned him a room at the far end of the hall from Delilah's. The next weeks unfolded with a sweetness Delilah had never known. She threw herself into her work at the boarding house, cooking hearty meals for the boarders and keeping the rooms spotless. The work was indeed hard, as Catherine had promised, but it was also satisfying. The boarders were a rough lot, mostly men working in the nearby mines or on the railroad, but they treated her with respect, especially after word got around that she was being courted by Cole Zimmerman. Cole, for his part, made himself useful around town. He hired himself out for various jobs, using his considerable strength and skills to help with building projects, hauling supplies, and breaking horses for the local ranchers. He was good with animals, patient and firm, and soon he was in high demand. The money he earned was enough to pay for his room at the boarding house, and still save a little besides. Every evening, after the supper dishes were cleared and the boarders had retired to their rooms or the saloon, Cole and Delilah would steal a few precious hours together. Sometimes they walked through town, bundled against the cold, talking about everything and nothing. Other times they sat in the boarding house parlor, Catherine discreetly giving them privacy while remaining close enough to serve as chaperone. They talked about their dreams for the future, about the lives they wanted to build, and with each conversation, the bond between them deepened. Cole courted her properly, with a respect and care that made Delilah love him even more. He brought her small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy, a delicate silver necklace he had purchased from the jeweler with his hard-earned money. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give, content with stolen kisses and the simple pleasure of her company. As winter began to loosen its grip and early spring crept into the mountains, Cole took Delilah to visit his cabin. They rode together through the forest, now showing the first signs of thaw, and when the small structure came into view, Delilah felt a rush of emotion. This was where their story had begun, where she had woken to find herself saved and cared for. Inside, everything was as she remembered: the stone fireplace, the rough furniture, the pelts hanging from the rafters. But now she saw it with different eyes, imagining what it could become with a woman's touch. Curtains at the windows, perhaps. A proper kitchen area. A larger bed for two instead of one. Cole watched her take it all in, a question in his eyes. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it could be a home," Delilah said softly. "Our home, if that is what you are asking." Cole moved to her, taking her hands in his. "I know we have not been courting long," he said. "And I know proper folk would say we should wait longer, get to know each other better. But Delilah, I knew my heart within days of meeting you. Every moment since has only confirmed what I already knew. You are the woman I want to spend my life with." He dropped to one knee and Delilah's breath caught in her throat. From his pocket he pulled a simple gold band, worn but beautiful. "This was my mother's ring," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is the only thing of value I have from my old life. I would be honored if you would wear it." He looked up at her, his dark eyes shining. "Delilah Wright, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Delilah's face as she nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Cole stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, and then they were kissing, pouring all their love and hope and joy into that single perfect moment. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Salida. Catherine stood as witness, beaming with happiness for her brother. The local minister, a kind man named Reverend Porter, performed the ceremony, speaking words about love and commitment and the sacred bonds of matrimony. Delilah wore a simple blue dress that Catherine had helped her make, and Cole wore his best shirt and vest, his hair neatly trimmed for the occasion. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, and Cole kissed her in front of God and witnesses, Delilah felt her heart might burst with happiness. After years of struggle and loss, after nearly dying in a snowstorm, she had found something she never dared hope for: true love and a partner to share her life with. The wedding supper was held at the boarding house, with all the boarders invited to celebrate. There was roasted chicken and potatoes, fresh bread and butter, and a cake that Catherine had baked herself. The miners and railroad workers, rough men unused to such occasions, nevertheless rose to toast the newlyweds. their good wishes sincere if somewhat awkwardly expressed. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, Cole pulled Delilah aside, leading her to the small office where Catherine kept her account books. He closed the door, giving them a moment of privacy, and pulled her into his arms. "Hello, Mrs. Zimmerman," he said, his voice warm with affection. "Hello, husband," Delilah replied, loving the feel of the word on her tongue. "Are you happy?" Cole asked, searching her face. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Delilah assured him. "You gave me hope when I had none, and now you have given me everything I could ever want." "We should head to the cabin soon," Cole said. "Start our life together properly." Delilah nodded, excitement and nervousness fluttering in her stomach. Tonight would be their wedding night, the beginning of their intimate life together. She knew the basics of what would happen, whispered knowledge passed from married women to unmarried girls, but the reality of it, the immediacy, made her pulse race. An hour later, after tearful goodbyes to Catherine and promises to visit soon, Cole and Delilah rode out of Salida toward his cabin, now their cabin. The spring evening was mild, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They rode in comfortable silence, Delilah's arms wrapped around Cole's waist, her cheek pressed against his back. When they arrived at the cabin, Cole surprised her by scooping her up in his arms and carrying her over the threshold, a tradition he said brought good luck to a marriage. Delilah laughed, her arms looped around his neck as he carefully navigated through the door. Inside, Cole had prepared for their arrival. Fresh flowers, early spring wildflowers he must have picked that morning, sat in a jar on the table. The bed had been made with clean linens, and candles cast a warm, flickering glow throughout the space. It was simple but thoughtful, and Delilah felt tears prick her eyes once again. "Cole, it is beautiful," she whispered. "Not as beautiful as you," he said, setting her gently on her feet. His hands framed her face, his touch reverent. "I love you, Delilah. I will spend every day of my life making sure you know that." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a joining that was both physical and spiritual. Cole was patient and gentle, guiding Delilah through the nervousness and uncertainty to a place of connection and pleasure that left her breathless and amazed. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, talking softly into the night about their hopes and dreams for the future. "I want to expand the cabin," Cole said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Add another room, maybe two. Build a proper kitchen for you, a place for children when they come." "Children," Delilah repeated, the word filling her with wonder. After years of loneliness and struggle, the idea of creating a family with Cole seemed almost too good to be true. "How many children do you want?" "As many as the Lord sees fit to bless us with," Cole said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Though I would be lying if I said I had not thought about a houseful. Boys to help with the trapping and hunting, girls to teach cooking and sewing, a whole rowdy bunch." Delilah laughed softly. "That sounds wonderful, chaotic but wonderful." "What about you?" Cole asked. "What do you want for our future?" Delilah considered the question. "I want what we have right now," she said finally. "Love and partnership and a safe place to call home. I want to wake up every morning next to you and fall asleep every night in your arms. I want to build a life that is ours, something no one can take away. And yes, I want children, as many as we are blessed with. I want to fill this cabin with laughter and love." "Then that is what we will do," Cole promised. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Delilah's life. She settled into her role as Cole's wife with ease, managing the household while he worked his trap lines and hunted game for both food and pelts. She learned to make soap and candles, to preserve meat and vegetables for the long winters, to mend everything from clothing to harnesses. Cole, in turn, proved to be an attentive and loving husband, never taking her for granted, always treating her as an equal partner in their marriage. They made the journey to Salida once a month for supplies and to visit Catherine, who had become not just a sister-in-law but a dear friend. On these visits, Delilah would help at the boarding house, giving Catherine a much-needed break, while Cole sold his pelts and handled other business in town. The boarders always greeted them warmly, pleased to see the couple so obviously happy together. Summer arrived, bringing with it long, golden days and the hard work of planting a garden and making improvements to the cabin. True to his word, Cole began expanding the structure, working in the evenings and on rainy days when he could not be out on the trap lines. He added a second room that would serve as a bedroom, leaving the main room for living and cooking, and he built a proper root cellar for storing food through the winter. It was during one of these construction projects, on a warm July afternoon, that Delilah realized she had missed her monthly courses. The knowledge sent a thrill of excitement and fear through her. She waited another week, wanting to be certain, and when her condition continued, she knew she had to tell Cole. She chose a quiet evening after supper, when they were sitting outside watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and purple. Cole had his arm around her and she was nestled against his side, savoring the peace of the moment. "Cole," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." He looked down at her, concern flickering across his face at her serious tone. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong," Delilah assured him quickly. "In fact, something is very right." She took a deep breath, her hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Cole simply stared at her, as if the words had not quite registered. Then understanding dawned, and his face transformed with such pure joy that it took Delilah's breath away. He let out a whoop of excitement, standing and pulling her up with him, spinning her around in a circle. "A baby!" he shouted to the mountains, his voice echoing back. "We are going to have a baby," Delilah laughed, dizzy from the spinning and from the happiness that flooded through her. When Cole set her down, he immediately dropped to his knees, pressing his ear against her stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Tears streamed down Delilah's cheeks as she ran her fingers through his hair. This moment, this perfect, beautiful moment, was everything she had never known she wanted. Cole looked up at her, his own eyes wet with emotion. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for giving me this gift, for giving us this family." "We made this together," Delilah said, drawing him to his feet and into her arms. "You and me, building our future one day at a time." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Delilah experienced some morning sickness in the early months, but it passed, leaving her feeling healthy and strong. Cole became even more protective than usual, insisting she rest often and refusing to let her help with any of the heavier chores. She found it both endearing and mildly exasperating, but she understood it came from a place of love and concern. When winter came again, bringing with it the anniversary of the day they met, Cole held her close and whispered, "1 year ago I found you in the snow, more dead than alive. Now look at us. Married, happy, with a baby on the way. It is like a miracle." "Hope starts here," Delilah whispered back, echoing the words he had spoken that fateful day. "You gave me hope when I had none, and look what it has grown into." As her belly swelled with their growing child, Delilah found herself increasingly grateful for Catherine's presence in their lives. Cole's sister visited often, making the journey from Salida despite the winter weather, bringing supplies and offering advice based on her own experiences, helping other women through childbirth. She also brought news from town, filling them in on the gossip, and goings-on of the community they were part of but lived apart from. "You know, you two should consider moving to town when the baby comes," Catherine suggested one evening as they sat by the fire, Delilah working on tiny garments for the baby while the men talked outside. "It would be safer, having a doctor nearby. And the baby would have other children to play with as it grows." Delilah shook her head. "This cabin is our home," she said firmly. "This is where our story began, where we built our life together. I want our children to grow up here in the mountains, learning to be strong and self-reliant like their father." Catherine smiled. "I thought you would say that. Cole is the same way, stubborn as a mule when he sets his mind to something. But promise me you will send for me when your time comes." "I want to be here to help." "I promise," Delilah said, squeezing her sister-in-law's hand gratefully. The baby came in early March, during a brief warm spell that had melted much of the winter snow. Cole had ridden to Salida 2 days earlier to fetch Catherine, and she was staying at the cabin, keeping Delilah company while they waited for the baby to decide it was ready to make its appearance. When the pain started, gentle at first but growing steadily stronger, Catherine took charge with calm efficiency. She sent Cole to heat water and gather clean cloths, keeping him busy with tasks so he would not pace and fret. Delilah labored through the day and into the evening, focusing on Catherine's steady voice guiding her through each contraction. Cole was allowed back into the cabin just as the sun was setting, and he held Delilah's hand, his face pale with worry as she pushed through the final, hardest stage of labor. And then, with a rush that left Delilah exhausted and exhilarated, their child was born. "It is a boy," Catherine announced, her voice jubilant. She cleaned the baby quickly, then placed him on Delilah's chest. "A beautiful, healthy boy." Delilah looked down at her son, this tiny, perfect creature she and Cole had created, and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it was almost painful. The baby had dark hair like his father and was already wailing lustily, announcing his arrival to the world. Cole stood beside the bed, staring at his son with an expression of wonder and awe. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." He reached out tentatively, running one finger down the baby's soft cheek. "Hello, son. Welcome to the world. What will you name him?" Catherine asked, finishing her cleanup work. Delilah and Cole exchanged glances. They had discussed names extensively over the past months, unable to decide between several favorites. But now, looking at their son, Delilah knew with absolute certainty what his name should be. "Thomas," she said. "Thomas James Zimmerman, after both our fathers." Cole's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "That is perfect," he said hoarsely. "Hello, Thomas. You are going to have such a good life, son. I promise you that." The weeks following Thomas's birth were exhausting but joyful. Delilah marveled at how something so small could demand so much attention, but she would not have traded it for anything. Cole proved to be a devoted father, getting up with her for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours simply holding his son and talking to him in a soft, gentle voice that made Delilah fall in love with him all over again. Catherine stayed for 2 weeks, helping Delilah recover and teaching her the basics of infant care. When she finally returned to Salida, she left with promises to visit often and with strict instructions that they send for her if they needed anything at all. Life settled into a new rhythm, one punctuated by Thomas's needs and demands. The cabin that had once seemed spacious now felt crowded with baby clothes drying by the fire, a cradle Cole had lovingly crafted taking up floor space, and the constant sounds of infant cries, coos, and laughter. As spring turned to summer and Thomas grew from a newborn to a chubby, active infant, Delilah watched Cole with their son and saw the last shadows of the war finally fade from his eyes. Fatherhood had given him a new purpose, a reason to look forward rather than back, and he embraced it with his whole heart. One evening, as they sat outside watching Thomas crawl around on a blanket, exploring his world with intense concentration, Cole reached over and took Delilah's hand. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the future, about what I want for our family." "What have you been thinking?" Delilah asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I want to build something lasting," Cole said. "Not just this cabin, but something bigger. Maybe expand into ranching, raise some cattle or horses. Build something we can pass down to Thomas and whatever other children we are blessed with." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I also think we should think about building a schoolhouse somewhere between here and Salida. There are enough families scattered in these mountains now that the children need proper education." Delilah lifted her head to look at him, surprise and admiration mingling in her chest. "That is a wonderful idea," she said. "All of it, but it will take a lot of work." "I know," Cole said. "But I am not afraid of hard work, and I will not be alone. I will have you by my side, my partner in everything." He squeezed her hand. "What do you think?" "I think you are an extraordinary man, Cole Zimmerman," Delilah said, leaning in to kiss him softly. "And I think whatever we build together will be something wonderful." Over the next several years, they did indeed build something wonderful. Cole gradually transitioned from trapping to ranching, starting with a small herd of cattle and a few horses. The work was backbreaking, requiring long hours and constant vigilance, but it was also rewarding in a way trapping had never been. Delilah helped where she could, managing the household and raising Thomas while also keeping the account books for their growing operation. Thomas proved to be a bright, energetic child, full of curiosity and mischief. He had his father's dark eyes and his mother's determined spirit, and watching him grow was a constant source of joy. When he was 3 years old, Delilah gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Catherine, after no one in particular, but because they loved the sound of it together. Sarah was quieter than her brother, with Delilah's light brown hair and a contemplative nature that reminded Cole of his mother. The schoolhouse idea came to fruition when Thomas was 5. Thanks to the combined efforts of several mountain families and a generous donation from a Denver businessman who had grown up in similar circumstances and wanted to give back. Cole threw himself into the construction project, and the small log building that resulted became a source of pride for the entire community. They hired a young teacher from the East, a serious woman named Miss Potter, and she opened the school's doors to any child who wanted to learn. Thomas started school that fall, riding into the schoolhouse location 3 times a week with Cole, who delivered him in the morning and picked him up in the afternoon. Delilah used those quieter days to focus on Sarah and to work on expanding her own skills, learning to make cheese and butter that she sold in Salida for extra money. When Thomas was 7 and Sarah was 4, Delilah found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder, leaving her exhausted and sick for months. Cole hovered worriedly, and even Catherine came to stay for several weeks, helping with the children and the household while Delilah rested. The baby, another boy they named Daniel, arrived early and small, causing everyone to worry. But he proved to be a fighter, growing stronger each day, and by the time he was 6 months old, he had caught up to where he should be. Daniel had red gold hair that came from neither parent, a genetic surprise they attributed to some distant ancestor, and a sunny disposition that made everyone who met him smile. With 3 children filling the cabin and the ranch continuing to grow, Cole finally undertook the major expansion he had been planning for years. He hired help from town, and together They built a proper house, 2 stories with 4 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and even a parlor for receiving guests. It was not fancy by city standards, but it was comfortable and spacious, and most importantly, it was theirs. The night they moved into the new house, after the children were asleep in their own rooms and Delilah and Cole lay in their new bed, Cole pulled her close and said, "Do you remember what I told you that first day? When I found you in the snow?" "Hope starts here," Delilah said immediately. "I will never forget those words. They saved my life." "They changed mine," Cole said. "Finding you, it gave me a reason to stop just surviving and start really living. Everything good in my life, this family, this home, it all started that day." "We built it together," Delilah reminded him, as she always did when he tried to give her too much credit. "You gave me hope, but I gave you a reason to have hope too." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the house settling and the wind in the trees outside. Then Cole spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "I want to take you on a trip," he said. "A real trip, not just to Salida but somewhere special, maybe to Denver or even as far as San Francisco. I want to show you the world beyond these mountains." Delilah considered it. The idea was appealing, a grand adventure with just the two of them, but there were practical concerns. What about the children? And the ranch? Catherine would take the children. She has been asking for years to have them visit for more than a day or two, Cole said. And we have hired men now who can handle the ranch for a week or two. I want to do this, Delilah. I want to give you something special, an experience you will always remember. You have given me so much already, Delilah protested, but she was smiling. But yes, I would love to take a trip with you. When were you thinking? Next spring, after the calving is done, Cole said. We will take the train to Denver, stay in a real hotel, see the sights. Maybe continue on to California if we are feeling adventurous. They did make that trip, leaving in May when the mountains were bursting with wildflowers, and the weather was perfect for travel. Catherine collected Thomas, Sarah, and Daniel with obvious delight, promising to spoil them thoroughly, and Delilah and Cole boarded the train to Denver with the giddy excitement of newlyweds. Denver was bustling and modern, with electric lights and tall buildings that made Salida look like a frontier outpost by comparison. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in fancy restaurants, and attended a performance at the Opera House. Cole bought Delilah a beautiful dress, and she wore it to dinner one evening, feeling sophisticated and worldly. But even amid all the excitement of the city, Delilah found herself missing their mountain home, missing the children and the simple rhythms of their life together. She could tell Cole felt the same way by how he kept talking about getting back to the ranch, checking on the cattle, making sure the hired men were managing properly. They did not continue on to California, deciding instead to return home after a week in Denver. And when they finally arrived back at their house, with Catherine delivering 3 excited children who had missed their parents terribly, Delilah felt her heart settle with satisfaction. This was where she belonged, in these mountains, with this man and these children. Everything else was just window dressing. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and celebrations. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch and showed a natural talent for working with horses. Sarah proved to be academically inclined, devouring every book she could get her hands on and talking about becoming a teacher like Miss Potter. Daniel, the baby, was the family's comedian, always ready with a joke or a funny face to lighten the mood. When Thomas was 15, Sarah 12, and Daniel 9, Delilah found herself pregnant once more. She was 41 years old and had assumed her childbearing years were behind her, but apparently God had other plans. Cole was both excited and worried, remembering the difficulty of Daniel's birth. But Delilah sailed through the pregnancy with surprising ease. Their fourth child, another girl they named Grace, arrived on a crisp October morning, delivered quickly and without complication. She had Cole's dark hair and Delilah's hazel eyes, and her three older siblings were absolutely smitten with her from the first moment. Watching her older children with the baby, seeing the tenderness and care they showed, Delilah felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She and Cole had created not just children but good people, kind souls who would go out into the world and make it better. One evening, when Grace was about 6 months old, Delilah stood on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the mountains while her family moved about inside. Cole came out to join her, slipping an arm around her waist and pulling her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Delilah said honestly. "About how I almost died in that storm 16 years ago, about how lost and hopeless I felt, and about how you found me and changed everything." She turned to look up at him, this man who had been her salvation and her partner, her lover and her best friend. "I was thinking about how lucky I am." "I am the lucky one," Cole insisted, but he was smiling. "You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to be more than I was. You made me better." "We made each other better," Delilah corrected gently. "That is what love does. It does not complete us because we were already complete, but it makes us want to be the best versions of ourselves." From inside the house, they heard Thomas's voice raised in laughter, followed by Sarah's indignant protest and Daniel's delighted giggling. The baby began to fuss, probably needing to be fed, and Catherine called out asking if anyone knew where she had left her knitting. "We should go in," Cole said, but neither of them moved, content to stand there a moment longer in the gathering darkness, wrapped in each other's arms. "In a minute," Delilah said, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I just want to remember this moment. Right here, right now, with our family safe and happy and together. This is everything I ever wanted." "Me too," Cole said softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Me too." The years continued their steady march forward, bringing changes and challenges, but also joy and growth. Thomas married at 21, wedding a sweet girl from Salida named Mary, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch property. Within a year, they gave Cole and Delilah their first grandchild, a boy named after Cole. Delilah found granddaughter even more delightful than motherhood, with all the joy and none of the sleepless nights. Sarah did indeed become a teacher, taking over from Miss Potter when the older woman retired. She was beloved by her students and respected by the community. And though she had several suitors, she showed no interest in marrying, declaring that she was perfectly content with her life as it was. Daniel, true to his nature, brought laughter and chaos wherever he went. He worked on the ranch with Thomas and Cole, but also had a talent for music, teaching himself to play the guitar and entertaining everyone with songs he made up on the spot. When he was 20, he fell head over heels for a fiery redhead named Catherine, who gave as good as she got in their playful arguments. They married in a joyful ceremony, and Daniel built a house even farther out on the ranch, expanding the family compound. Grace, the surprise baby, grew up surrounded by love and laughter. She was creative and artistic, always drawing or painting, seeing beauty in everything around her. Cole built her a small studio when she was 16, and she spent hours there, creating works that captured the spirit of their mountain home. Through it all, Cole and Delilah remained the steady center, the foundation upon which their family was built. They still took walks together in the evenings, still talked for hours by the fire, still shared a love that had only deepened with time. They had their disagreements, of course, moments of frustration or misunderstanding, but they always talked through them, always came back to the love that bound them together. When Delilah turned 50, Cole threw her a surprise party, gathering family and friends from all over to celebrate. The house was packed with people, with grandchildren running underfoot and adults spilling out onto the porch. Catherine came from Salida, now in her 60s but still spry and sharp-witted. The current residents of her boarding house sent gifts and well wishes. As Delilah stood in the center of the chaos, watching her children and grandchildren, seeing Cole across the room laughing with Thomas and Daniel, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. How different her life could have been if not for that storm, if not for Cole finding her at just the right moment. She could have died in the snow, anonymous and forgotten. Instead, she had lived a life full of love and meaning, had built something lasting and beautiful. Cole caught her eye from across the room and made his way to her, navigating through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own home. When he reached her, he took her hands and pulled her into a quiet corner. "Happy birthday, my love," he said, his voice warm with affection. "Thank you for this," Delilah said, gesturing to the party still going strong around them. "For all of this, not just today but everything. This life we have built." "It has been my honor," Cole said seriously. "Every single day with you has been a gift." "I meant what I said that first day. Hope starts here. You were my hope, Delilah. You still are." Tears filled Delilah's eyes, but they were happy tears. "And you were mine," she said. "My hope, my salvation, my everything." They kissed there in the corner of their crowded house, surrounded by family and friends, but in that moment existing only for each other. And when they finally pulled apart, they rejoined the party hand in hand, ready to celebrate not just Delilah's birthday but the extraordinary life they had created together. The years passed more quickly now, it seemed. Cole and Delilah watched their grandchildren grow, attended weddings and baptisms, mourned the few losses that came with the passage of time. Catherine passed away peacefully in her sleep at 72, and they buried her in the Salida cemetery with a headstone that read, "Beloved sister and friend." Her boarding house was sold, but the memories of her kindness and generosity lived on in all whose lives she had touched. Cole began to slow down as he entered his 60s, his body finally showing the wear of decades of hard work. He turned more and more of the ranch operations over to Thomas and Daniel, content to advise rather than lead. He took up woodcarving in his spare time, creating beautiful pieces that Delilah treasured. Delilah herself remained remarkably healthy and active, tending her garden and cooking for the family gatherings that happened with increasing frequency. She wrote down family recipes and stories, wanting to preserve them for future generations. She also began volunteering at Sarah's school, reading to the younger children and sharing tales of the old days when the West was still wild and untamed. One winter evening, when Cole was 68 and Delilah was 66, they sat by the fire in the house they had built together all those years ago. Snow fell softly outside, reminiscent of that storm so long ago that had brought them together. Cole held Delilah's hand, their fingers intertwined in a familiar, comfortable way. "You ever think about that day?" Cole asked quietly. "The day I found you, all the time," Delilah admitted. "I think about how close I came to dying, how easily our story could have never happened. And then I think about how blessed I am that you were there, that you cared enough to save a stranger." "You were never really a stranger," Cole said thoughtfully. "From the moment I saw you in that snow, I felt something. Like I was meant to find you, like our lives were always supposed to intersect at that exact moment." "Fate," Delilah suggested. "Maybe," Cole said. "Or divine providence or simple luck. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every single day." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I love you, Delilah Zimmerman. I have loved you from the moment you opened your eyes in my cabin, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Delilah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Always and forever." They sat there as the fire burned low and the snow continued to fall. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that was rich with love and meaning. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and unchanging, silent witnesses to the countless stories played out in their shadow. But few of those stories, Delilah thought, could match the beauty and wonder of her own. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and Cole and Delilah continued to age with grace and dignity. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, the newest generation of Zimmermans carrying on the family name. The party was held at the ranch, with tables set up outdoors under the summer sun, laden with food and drink. Thomas stood to make a toast, his own hair now showing threads of silver. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "They showed us what true love looks like, what commitment means, what it takes to build something lasting. They started with nothing but each other, and look what they created." He gestured to the assembled family. "All of this, all of us, we exist because they loved each other and were not afraid to work hard for their dreams. Here is to 40 more years." Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the sentiment, and Cole squeezed Delilah's hand under the table. They both knew that 40 more years was unlikely at their age, but the wish was appreciated nonetheless. As the celebration continued into the evening, with music and dancing, and the kind of chaos that only large family gatherings can produce, Delilah found herself thinking about legacy. What would remain of her and Cole after they were gone? The ranch, certainly, would continue under Thomas's capable management. The house would stand for generations, hopefully, shelter for future Zimmermans. But more than physical things, they were leaving behind the example of their love, the model of a partnership built on respect and affection and unwavering commitment. That, Delilah thought, was the greatest legacy of all. Cole lived to see his 75th birthday, still sharp-minded though his body had grown frail. He spent his days sitting on the porch, watching the ranch operate around him, occasionally offering advice when asked but mostly content to simply observe. Delilah remained by his side, as she had been for nearly half a century, reading to him when his eyes grew too weak, telling him stories, simply being present. One evening in late autumn, as the aspens turned gold and the air carried the first hint of winter, Cole asked Delilah to take a walk with him. She helped him down the porch steps, and they made their way slowly to the spot where the old cabin had stood. Cole had never torn it down, even after building the big house, and though it was weathered and worn now, it remained standing, a monument to their beginning. "This is where it all started," Cole said, his voice raspy with age. "This is where I brought you after I found you in the snow. This is where you woke up and I saw your eyes for the first time and knew my life had changed forever." "I remember," Delilah said softly, her own eyes stinging with tears. "I remember thinking you were an angel come to save me." "Just a man," Cole said. "A man lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time." He turned to face her, his weathered hands cupping her face with infinite tenderness. "Thank you, Delilah. Thank you for saying yes when I proposed, for building this life with me, for giving me a family and a purpose. You made me happier than I ever had any right to be." "Cole, why are you talking like this?" Delilah asked, fear suddenly clutching at her heart. "Like you are saying goodbye." "Because I am tired, my love," Cole admitted. "I've lived a good life, a full life, but I am ready to rest now. And I wanted to make sure you knew before I go how much you meant to me, how much you still mean to me." "You are not going anywhere," Delilah said fiercely, even as tears streamed down her cheeks. "You are staying right here with me." Cole smiled, that slow, gentle smile that still had the power to make her heart skip. "I will always be with you," he said. "But if it is my time, I want you to let me go without guilt or regret. Promise me, Delilah. Promise me you will keep living, keep loving, keep being the extraordinary woman I fell in love with." "I promise," Delilah whispered, though the words felt like they were being torn from her soul. "But please stay as long as you can." "I will," Cole assured her, "as long as I can." Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, Delilah beside him as she had been for so many nights before. The family gathered to mourn, and he was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, his grave marked with a simple stone that read Cole Zimmerman, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He gave hope to all who knew him. Delilah grieved deeply, feeling the loss of her partner like a physical wound. But she kept her promise, continuing to live fully even in her sorrow. She remained in the big house, surrounded by family who checked on her daily, refusing to be moved into town or into one of her children's homes. This was where she and Cole had built their life together, and this was where she would stay. She lived for another 8 years, watching more grandchildren marry and have children of their own. She told stories about Cole to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive through her words. And every evening, weather permitting, she would make her way to the hill where he was buried and sit beside his grave, talking to him about her day, about the family, about how much she missed him. On a cold February morning, just after her 74th birthday, Delilah did not wake. She passed as peacefully as Cole had, slipping away in the night as snow fell softly outside the window. The family buried her next to Cole on the hill, and her headstone read, "Delilah Zimmerman, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She found hope in the storm and built a legacy of love." And if the stories passed down through generations of Zimmermans are to be believed, on winter nights when the snow falls heavy and the wind howls through the mountains, two figures can sometimes be seen walking hand in hand on the ranch, their love transcending even death itself. The cabin where it all began still stands, carefully maintained by the family as a reminder of where they came from, of the storm that brought two souls together and changed the course of so many lives. The ranch continues to thrive, now run by Cole and Delilah's great-grandchildren, the fourth generation of Zimmermans to call these mountains home. And every year, on the anniversary of the day Cole found Delilah in the snowstorm, the family gathers on the hill where they are buried to remember and give thanks for the love story that started it all, for the hope that was born in the depths of a winter storm, and for the legacy of love that continues to bless them all. Hope did indeed start there, in that moment when a cowboy found a dying woman and refused to let her give up. It grew and flourished through the years, spreading out to touch countless lives, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary things can come from the most desperate moments, and that true love, once found, never truly dies.